If you're a Formula 1 fan, you might be familiar with the now infamous second Red Bull seat curse. Although generational talent Max Verstappen has been able to carry the team to 4 consecutive driver championships, 65 race wins, and has snapped records left, right, and center, since 2019 their second car has been a revolving door of drivers, with none of them being able to find success in the same exact equipment. But in Formula E, one team seems to be having the same issue. Since 2021, when Andretti picked up eventual world champion Jake Dennis, that second seat has seen 5 drivers, technically 6 if we're counting substitutes, and as of the beginning of this season, none of them have been able to come within 8 points positions of him. But why has this quote-unquote curse happened? How is it different from Red Bull's curse in Formula 1, and is there a chance this curse continues into next season? First and foremost, let's get familiar with the curse as it applies to Red Bull. In August of 2018, longtime Red Bull driver Daniel Ricciardo announced that he would be leaving the Aston Martin Red Bull team to join Renault for 2019. Naturally, Red Bull looked to their junior team Toro Rosso for a suitable replacement, selecting Pierre Gasly, who had performed admirably for the team, thoroughly thrashing teammate Brendan Hartley in 2018. Gasly, though, didn't live up to their incredibly high standards, it seemed. Through his 12 races with the team, he scored 63 points, only finished outside the points in 3 races, and had a best finish of P4. Honestly, in hindsight, these stats would be loved by Red Bull today. But compared to Verstappen's 2 wins, 4 podiums, and 181 points, it just wasn't good enough. Gasly was axed and Alex Albon was promoted from Toro Rosso. Albon's 8 races to close out 2019 were better though, and only failing to finish outside the points once. But that second seat was still without a single podium. Albon was retained for 2020 but wasn't as consistent, failing to score in 5 races, and despite scoring his first 2 podiums, still finished with less than half of the points of Verstappen, failing to capitalize in a year where drivers such as Pierre Gasly and Sergio Perez took victories. Once again, even though these stats weren't entirely terrible and would be praised today, Red Bull was still complacent, replacing Albon with the top free agent Sergio Perez for 2021. Perez's experience finally seemed to click with the second Red Bull seat, scoring a victory in Azerbaijan, 5 podiums, and aided Verstappen's championship quest. In 2022, a year of utter Red Bull domination, Perez was there once again, scoring 2 victories but failed to beat Charles Leclerc to P2 in the driver standings. He'd get that P2 in 2023 after 2 more victories and one of the most dominating seasons of all time by Verstappen and Red Bull. But towards the end of the year, Perez's results seemed to falter slightly. These cracks only got wider in 2024. 2024 began well for Perez, with 4 podiums in the first 5 races. From there, his form fell off a cliff. As Verstappen won his 4th title, Perez fell farther and farther down the order until he finished the year 8th in the driver's standings. This catastrophic collapse forced Red Bull to terminate Perez's contract and promoted rookie Liam Lawson. Lawson was only allowed a grand total of 2 pointless, underwhelming races before he was replaced by Yuki Tsunoda, who now sits in the Red Bull seat, struggling as his predecessors did to score points. Red Bull's primary problem has generally been attributed to the car's design being very tricky and difficult to come to grips with. Max Verstappen, being an incredible driver, has been able to adapt to the car, and maybe it even suits his driving style. The revolving door of drivers next to him, though, simply haven't been as versatile or haven't been given the opportunity to adapt to it. But this is a very different cause to the problem that Andretti is suffering in their Formula E program. For this, we go back to August of 2020. Alexander Sims has just left the BMW i Andretti team to join Mahindra. Sims had an alright 2-year tenure with the team, scoring his first victory during Season 6, but he'd only scored 2 podiums during his time with Andretti. His teammates, on the other hand, first Antonio Felix da Costa in Season 5, had scored a victory and 4 podiums to finish P5 in the standings, compared to Sims' P13. After da Costa left for Season 6, Andretti hired 21-year-old Maximilian Gunther, who had broken out, scoring 2 victories, though inconsistency relegated him to P9 in the driver's standings, still well ahead of Sims' second consecutive P13. BMW and Andretti deliberated who to sign in the number 27 seat to partner Gunther for Season 7, reportedly testing their DTM drivers Philip Eng, Marco Wittmann, and Lucas Auer, all BMW factory drivers. In the end, it was a left-field signing, ironically of an Aston Martin Red Bull development driver, Jake Dennis. Coming in as a complete rookie to Formula E, I don't think anyone was expecting Dennis to match Gunther's pace, especially after the young German's breakout season in 2020. We were all proven wrong. Through the tumultuous Season 7, Dennis started out slow but found speed in the middle of the season, taking advantage of the qualifying format. He scored his first career win in the second Valencia race from pole, leading lights to flag. Before this race, he was P22 in the standings. After this win, he leapt all the way up to P8. 2 P5s in Puebla, another victory in London, and 2 more points finishes pushed him up into being among the key championship contenders, sitting P3, 4 points behind leader Nick DeVries heading into the final race. After an early safety car, Dennis was tied for the championship lead, but suffered a gearbox issue coming back to the green, setting him into the wall and knocking him out of the race. In the end, Dennis finished the year P3 in the standings with 2 victories, which were his 2 podiums, and 7 points finishes. In all honesty, it was a flashy rookie season with good finishes masking some pretty inconsistent results. But now, let's look at Gunther. Andretti's prodigy had a more consistent season than his teammate, but his 8 points finishes were rather smaller hauls than Dennis's. He scored a victory in New York, but no other podium finishes, despite being close in both Valencia and Puebla, but failing to score in either race. In the end, he finished P16 in the driver's standings, 13 spots behind Dennis, but with only 25 less points. And thus, the curse began. In September of 2021, Gunther left to join Nissan for Season 8. The Andretti team, now without the BMW title sponsorship, began scouting drivers to replace him, preferably an American driver to help bring in some local investment. After looking at Kyle Kirkwood, man, imagine if he'd been given the nod. Andretti settled on Oliver Askew, the 2019 Indy Lights champion, coming in as a free agent after being dropped by Air McLaren after 2020 and racing part-time in 2021. So, how did this duo square up at the newly rebranded Avalanche Andretti team for 2022? In my opinion, this season was when Dennis truly became one of the best drivers in Formula E. 2021 looks better on paper, but 2022 was much more consistent. 4 podiums, 2 poles, 8 dual appearances, and a Grand Slam victory in London, en route to a P6 in the driver's standings. Askew, on the other hand, despite scoring points in his debut race in Diriyah, was thoroughly trapped in the midfield, failing to score in the next 11 races. The streak would be broken by an incredible P4 in London, but followed up by 2 retirements, ending the year with a solid P5. So 3 total points finishes, 3 dual appearances, and a points finish of P16. Honestly, this year was just odd. Askew was randomly quick in some races, and in other races seemed almost lost. But the fact of the matter was, 24 points to Dennis's 126 wasn't going to cut it, especially with Andretti going into the Gen 3 era with a highly coveted Porsche powertrain alliance. And so out with Askew, in with Porsche factory driver Andre Lauderer. The first race in Mexico City would be brilliant, with Dennis taking the victory and Lauderer scoring a strong P4. This, though, would be the German's best finish all season long. Dennis followed the victory with 2 straight runner-up finishes, a 4-race non-scoring streak led into an incredible last 9 races of the year, 5 straight podiums, a P4 in Rome, then a victory the next day, and 2 podiums to close out the year. This, of course, would allow Dennis to clinch the Drivers' Championship with 1 race left in the season, capping off one of the most impressive seasons in recent memory. In the end, it was 2 race wins, 11 podiums in 16 races, which was 69% of the season, nice, 2 poles, 11 dual appearances, and a grand total of 229 points. So how did Lauderer do? Well, after Mexico, he'd score points in 4 more races, 3 P9s and a P8, completely set out the Jakarta round due to conflicts with him testing for the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and failed to score the rest of the year. With a pitiful 23 points, 1 dual appearance, and P18 in the driver's standings behind even the Neo of Dan Ticktum, it was no surprise that he decided to retire from Formula E to focus on the World Endurance Championship. David Beckman, the driver who replaced Lauderer in Jakarta, became Andretti's 4th driver in 3 years, and he'd later go on to join the Formula E grid full-time for Season 11. But in the meantime, Andretti needed yet another driver for Season 10. After talking to Robin Freins and Nick DeVries, they seemed to settle on Felipe Drugovich before, hyperfixation. And so Andretti opted for free agent Norman Nato, who had been kicked out of Nissan despite scoring a podium, and would seem to finally get his shot in top equipment. Andretti Global's 2024 would not be nearly as good as this 2023. Dennis began the year strong, taking a win in Diriyah and podiums in Tokyo and Misano, but inconsistency and points finishes that weren't as high as the Jaguars and Porsches dropped him slowly out of contention. A catastrophic final weekend in London would relegate him to P7 in the standings, with 1 win, 4 podiums, 1 pole, and 3 dual appearances. Dennis was inconsistent, but at least he could be backed up by his higher finishes. Nato, though, didn't have the luxury. Although he scored a podium in Shanghai, his other points finishes weren't enough to carry him up the standings, ending up P15, albeit with a pretty decent 6 dual appearances, though 75 points behind Dennis. And of course, Nato's contract wasn't renewed. Instead, Nico Muller was promoted up after overachieving at the Abt team to join the Porsche family, and is currently Dennis's 6th teammate in Formula E. So far this season, Andretti seems to have continued their form from Season 10, with Dennis currently sitting P9 in the standings with just a single podium scored. Muller is currently sitting P15, 24 points behind Dennis. Muller's had a really unlucky season so far and really should be higher up, but at the very least, it doesn't seem like Andretti would want to drop him anytime soon. If anything, Porsche seems to want to promote him to replace Antonio Felix da Costa, which is a move I don't really understand, but if it happens, the Andretti-Dennis curse will continue for another year. But the fact still prevails. Jake Dennis has easily outscored and outpaced every single teammate he's been paired up against. In Red Bull's case in Formula 1, we can make the argument that the car was designed a certain way, whether that be aerodynamically, structurally, etc., and that the second driver just wasn't as embedded with it as Verstappen is. But this argument doesn't carry over to Formula E. It's a spec chassis series, meaning that the feel and overall driving standard of each car should in theory be identical. Performance differences are mostly chalked up to powertrains and software. So it's a bit odd that when promoted to a top team, these drivers just seem to fall off so consistently. But I think that based on the specific drivers that have been paired up against Dennis, I might be able to find a brief explanation as to why they didn't fare up as well. First, Gunther. 2021 was only Gunther's 3rd season in Formula E, his 2nd full-time season. He's an incredibly aggressive driver, and in those early years was a bit of an over-aggressive driver, and if you ask me, he didn't fix this problem until maybe the second half of Season 9. But at the time he was paired up with Dennis, his over-aggression got the better of him, not allowing his raw speed to present itself as often. Dennis this season was less experienced, but had a higher ceiling, which allowed him to take advantage of the chaos and outperform his teammates so greatly. Then, we move on to Askew. This one's pretty simple to explain. Askew came into the seat a complete rookie to Formula E, and while some can adapt pretty quickly, others don't get the hang of it even after several years. I think for Askew there were certain tracks that suited him a little more, but he didn't have much time to learn the ones that didn't. Dennis was fully acclimated to FE by now, and especially to the BMW powertrain, so he was able to make the most of this year. Lauder I think is pretty simple to explain as well. He was decent to start the year, but after missing races in Jakarta, it became pretty obvious that he wasn't going to be continuing in Formula E much longer, so his head definitely wasn't in it the rest of the year. And at this point, Dennis was definitely a much stronger driver than Lauder, despite having less experience. Norman Nato, I hate to say it, but I just don't think he's that great in Formula E. A lot of times for him, one single good result carries what was otherwise a pretty mediocre season. Even with a win in Season 7, he was only good enough for P18 in points, while teammate Mortara finished P2. Season 9 I'll give you, that was a pretty good year, but he scored more points that year in the Nissan than he did with Andretti. And we're seeing this year in Season 11, now that he's back with Nissan, how he can truly do in what's arguably the best car on the grid. That leaves us with Nico Muller. This one I'd put mostly to luck, but also due to being with a new team, at the introduction of a new car, and a new strategy and pit boost, at a few new circuits. It was a lot of changes to adapt to all at once, and he hasn't been awful. His non-scores have primarily been due to crashes rather than lack of pace. He absolutely should have been in a winning position to win Monaco, but was set back a bit by the malfunctioning pit boost charger. And I think his true pace is shown when you look at Formula E's engineered to outrun leaderboard, which tracks how many points a driver made up during each race. Muller is right at the top and made up the most spots in Shanghai 2, Monaco 1, and Miami. But the simple fact is, just like Max Verstappen in Formula 1, Jake Dennis is an incredible talent in Formula E. Andretti has taken a bit of a step back these last 2 years, but that may be due to the customer teams not being as competitive after Season 9, a year that saw both Andretti and Envision beat their parent teams to the Drivers and Teams titles. Dennis is probably a bit better than the car he's in right now, but we'll see as the year plays on if the battle between him and Muller closes up. If you ask me, there's a good chance that the Andretti second seat curse ends after this year, because I just can't see Porsche getting rid of DaCosta for Muller right now. Maybe for Cassidy, but not for Muller. But now, I want to hear what you think. What do you think is the cause for the Red Bull S problem that Andretti and Jake Dennis seem to be facing? I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.